Chapter 9. Until Prince Andrew settled in Bogucharovo, its owners had always been absentees, and its peasants were of quite a different character from those of Bald Hills. They differed from them in speech, dress, and disposition. They were called steppe peasants. The old prince used to approve of them for their endurance at work when they came to Bald Hills to help with the harvest, or to dig ponds and ditches, but he disliked them for their boorishness. Prince Andrew's last stay at Bogucharovo, when he introduced hospitals and schools and reduced the quit-rent the peasants had to pay, had not softened their disposition but had on the contrary strengthened in them the traits of character the old prince called boorishness. Various obscure rumors were always current among them, at one time a rumor that they would all be enrolled as Cossacks, at another of a new religion to which they were all to be converted, then of some proclamation of the Tsars and of an oath to the Tsar Paul in 1797. In connection with which it was rumored that freedom had been granted them but the landowners had stopped it, then of Peter Fedorovitch's return to the throne in 7 years' time, when everything would be made free and so simple, that there would be no restrictions. Rumors of the war with Bonaparte and his invasion were connected in their minds with the same sort of vague notions of Antichrist, the end of the world, and pure freedom. In the vicinity of Bogucharovo were large villages belonging to the crown or to owners whose serfs paid quit-rent and could work where they pleased. There were very few resident landlords in the neighborhood and also very few domestic or literate serfs, and in the lives of the peasantry of those parts the mysterious undercurrents in the life of the Russian people, the causes and meaning of which are so baffling to contemporaries, were more clearly and strongly noticeable than among others. One instance, which had occurred some 20 years before, was a movement among the peasants to emigrate to some unknown, warm rivers. Hundreds of peasants, among them the Bogucharovo folk, suddenly began selling their cattle and moving in whole families toward the southeast. As birds migrate to somewhere beyond the sea, so these men with their wives and children streamed to the southeast, to parts where none of them had ever been. They set off in caravans, bought their freedom one by one or ran away, and drove or walked toward the warm rivers. Many of them were punished, some sent to Siberia, many died of cold and hunger on the road, many returned of their own accord, and the movement died down of itself just as it had sprung up, without apparent reason. But such undercurrents still existed among the people and gathered new forces ready to manifest themselves just as strangely, unexpectedly, and at the same time simply, naturally, and forcibly. Now in 1812, to anyone living in close touch with these people it was apparent that these undercurrents were acting strongly and nearing an eruption. Alpatych, who had reached Bogucharovo shortly before the old prince's death, noticed an agitation among the peasants, and that contrary to what was happening in the Bald Hills district, where over a radius of 40 miles all the peasants were moving away and leaving their villages to be devastated by the Cossacks, the peasants in the steppe region round Bogucharovo were, it was rumored, in touch with the French, received leaflets from them that passed from hand to hand, and did not migrate. He learned from domestic serfs loyal to him that the peasant Karp, who possessed great influence in the village commune and had recently been away driving a government transport, had returned with news that the Cossacks were destroying deserted villages, but that the French did not harm them. Alpatych also knew that on the previous day another peasant had even brought from the village of Vislukovo, which was occupied by the French, a proclamation by a French general that no harm would be done to the inhabitants, and if they remained they would be paid for anything taken from them. As proof of this the peasant had brought from Vislukovo 100 rubles in notes. He did not know that they were false, paid to him in advance for hay. More important still, Alpatych learned that on the morning of the very day he gave the village elder orders to collect carts to move the princess luggage from Bogucharovo, there had been a village meeting at which it had been decided not to move but to wait. Yet there was no time to waste. On the 15th, the day of the old prince's death, the marshal had insisted on Princess Mary's leaving at once, as it was becoming dangerous. He had told her that after the 16th he could not be responsible for what might happen. On the evening of the day the old prince died the marshal went away, promising to return next day for the funeral. But this he was unable to do, for he received tidings that the French had unexpectedly advanced, and had barely time to remove his own family and valuables from his estate. For some 30 years Bogucharovo had been managed by the village elder, Dran, whom the old prince called by the diminutive Dranushka. Dron was one of those physically and mentally vigorous peasants who grow big beards as soon as they are of age and go on unchanged till they are 60 or 70, without a grey hair or the loss of a tooth, as straight and strong at 60 as at 30. Soon after the migration to the warm rivers, in which he had taken part like the rest, Dron was made village elder and overseer of Bogucharovo, and had since filled that post irreproachably for 23 years. The peasants feared him more than they did their master. The masters, both the old prince and the young, and the steward respected him and jestingly called him the minister. During the whole time of his service Dron had never been drunk or ill, never after sleepless nights or the hardest tasks had he shown the least fatigue, and though he could not read he had never forgotten a single money account or the number of quarters of flour in any of the endless cartloads he sold for the prince, nor a single shock of the whole corn crop on any single acre of the Bogucharovo fields. Alpatych, arriving from the devastated Bald Hills estate, sent for his Dron on the day of the prince's funeral and told him to have 12 horses got ready for the princess carriages and 18 carts for the things to be removed from Bogucharovo. Though the peasants paid quit-rent, Alpatych thought no difficulty would be made about complying with this order, for there were 230 households at work in Bogucharovo and the peasants were well-to-do. But on hearing the order Dron lowered his eyes and remained silent. Alpatych named certain peasants he knew, from whom he told him to take the carts. Dron replied that the horses of these peasants were away carting. Alpatych named others, but they too, according to Dron, had no horses available. Some horses were carting for the government, others were too weak, and others had died for want of fodder. It seemed that no horses could be had even for the carriages, much less for the carting. Alpatych looked intently at Dron and frowned. Just as Dron was a model village elder, so Alpatych had not managed the prince's estates for 20 years in vain. He was a model steward, possessing in the highest degree the faculty of divining the needs and instincts of those he dealt with. Having glanced at Dron he at once understood that his answers did not express his personal views but the general mood of the Bogucharovo commune, by which the elder had already been carried away. But he also knew that Dron, who had acquired property and was hated by the commune, must be hesitating between the two camps, the masters and the serfs. He noticed this hesitation in Dron's look and therefore frowned and moved closer up to him. "Now just listen, Dronushka," said he. "Don't talk nonsense to me. His Excellency Prince Andrew himself gave me orders to move all the people away and not leave them with the enemy, and there is an order from the Tsar about it too. Anyone who stays is a traitor to the Tsar. Do you hear?" "I hear," Dron answered without lifting his eyes. Alpatych was not satisfied with this reply. Dron, it will turn out badly," he said, shaking his head. "The power is in your hands," Dron rejoined sadly. Dron, drop it," Alpatych repeated, withdrawing his hand from his bosom and solemnly pointing to the floor at Dron's feet. "I can see through you and 3 yards into the ground under you," he continued, gazing at the floor in front of Dron. Dron was disconcerted, glanced furtively at Alpatych and again lowered his eyes. "You drop this nonsense and tell the people to get ready to leave their homes and go to Moscow and to get carts ready for tomorrow morning for the princess things. And don't go to any meeting yourself, do you hear?" Dron suddenly fell on his knees. "Yakov Alpatych, discharge me. Take the keys from me and discharge me, for Christ's sake." "Stop that," cried Alpatych sternly. "I see through you and 3 yards under you," he repeated, knowing that his skill in beekeeping, his knowledge of the right time to sow the oats, and the fact that he had been able to retain the old prince's favor for 20 years had long since gained him the reputation of being a wizard, and that the power of seeing 3 yards under a man is considered an attribute of wizards. Dron got up and was about to say something, but Alpatych interrupted him. "What is it you have got into your heads, eh? What are you thinking of, eh?" "What am I to do with the people?" said Dron. "They're quite beside themselves, I have already told them." "Told them, I dare say," said Alpatych. "Are they drinking?" he asked abruptly. "Quite beside themselves, Yakov Alpatych, they've fetched another barrel." "Well, then, listen. I'll go to the police officer, and you tell them so, and that they must stop this and the carts must be got ready." "I understand." Alpatych did not insist further. He had managed people for a long time and knew that the chief way to make them obey is to show no suspicion that they can possibly disobey. Having wrung a submissive, "I understand," from Dran, Alpatych contented himself with that, though he not only doubted but felt almost certain that without the help of troops the carts would not be forthcoming. And so it was, for when evening came no carts had been provided. In the village, outside the drink shop, another meeting was being held, which decided that the horses should be driven out into the woods and the carts should not be provided. Without saying anything of this to the princess, Alpatych had his own belongings taken out of the carts which had arrived from Bald Hills and had those horses got ready for the princess carriages. Meanwhile he went himself to the police authorities. Chapter 10. After her father's funeral, Princess Mary shut herself up in her room and did not admit anyone. A maid came to the door to say that Alpatych was asking for orders about their departure. This was before his talk with Dran. Princess Mary raised herself on the sofa on which she had been lying and replied through the closed door that she did not mean to go away and begged to be left in peace. The windows of the room in which she was lying looked westward. She lay on the sofa with her face to the wall, fingering the buttons of the leather cushion and seeing nothing but that cushion, and her confused thoughts were centered on one subject, the irrevocability of death and her own spiritual baseness, which she had not suspected, but which had shown itself during her father's illness. She wished to pray but did not dare to, dared not in her present state of mind address herself to God. She lay for a long time in that position. The sun had reached the other side of the house, and its slanting rays shone into the open window, lighting up the room and part of the morocco cushion at which Princess Mary was looking. The flow of her thoughts suddenly stopped. Unconsciously she sat up, smoothed her hair, got up, and went to the window, involuntarily inhaling the freshness of the clear but windy evening. "Yes, you can well enjoy the evening now. He is gone and no one will hinder you," she said to herself, and sinking into a chair she let her head fall on the window sill. Someone spoke her name in a soft and tender voice from the garden and kissed her head. She looked up. It was Mademoiselle Bourienne in a black dress and weepers. She softly approached Princess Mary, sighed, kissed her, and immediately began to cry. The princess looked up at her. All their former disharmony and her own jealousy recurred to her mind. But she remembered too how he had changed of late toward Mademoiselle Bourienne and could not bear to see her, thereby showing how unjust were the reproaches Princess Mary had mentally addressed to her. Besides, is it for me who desired his death, to condemn anyone, she thought. Princess Mary vividly pictured to herself the position of Mademoiselle Bourienne, whom she had of late kept at a distance, but who yet was dependent on her and living in her house. She felt sorry for her and held out her hand with a glance of gentle inquiry. Mademoiselle Bourienne at once began crying again and kissed that hand, speaking of the princess' sorrow and making herself a partner in it. She said her only consolation was the fact that the princess allowed her to share her sorrow, that all the old misunderstandings should sink into nothing but this great grief, that she felt herself blameless in regard to everyone, and that he, from above, saw her affection and gratitude. The princess heard her, not heeding her words but occasionally looking up at her and listening to the sound of her voice. "Your position is doubly terrible, dear princess," said Mademoiselle Bourienne after a pause. "I understand that you could not, and cannot, think of yourself, but with my love for you I must do so. Has Alpatych been to you? Has he spoken to you of going away?" she asked. Princess Mary did not answer. She did not understand who was to go or where to. Is it possible to plan or think of anything now? Is it not all the same, she thought, and did not reply. "You know, chère Marie," said Mademoiselle Bourienne, "that we are in danger, are surrounded by the French. It would be dangerous to move now. If we go we are almost sure to be taken prisoners, and God knows." Princess Mary looked at her companion without understanding what she was talking about. "Oh, if anyone knew how little anything matters to me now," she said. "Of course I would on no account wish to go away from him. Alpatych did say something about going. Speak to him, I can do nothing, and don't want to. I've spoken to him. He hopes we should be in time to get away tomorrow, but I think it would now be better to stay here, said Mademoiselle Bourienne. Because, you will agree, chère Marie, to fall into the hands of the soldiers or of riotous peasants would be terrible. Mademoiselle Bourienne took from her reticule a proclamation, not printed on ordinary Russian paper, of General Rameau's, telling people not to leave their homes and that the French authorities would afford them proper protection. She handed this to the princess. I think it would be best to appeal to that general, she continued, and I am sure that all due respect would be shown you. Princess Mary read the paper, and her face began to quiver with stifled sobs. From whom did you get this? She asked. They probably recognize that I am French, by my name, replied Mademoiselle Bourienne blushing. Princess Mary, with the paper in her hand, rose from the window and with a pale face went out of the room and into what had been Prince Andrew's study. Dunyasha, send Alpatych, or Dranushka, or somebody to me, she said, and tell Mademoiselle Bourienne not to come to me, she added, hearing Mademoiselle Bourienne's voice. We must go at once, she said, appalled at the thought of being left in the hands of the French. If Prince Andrew heard that I was in the power of the French. That I, the daughter of Prince Nicholas Bolkonsky, asked General Rameau for protection and accepted his favor. This idea horrified her, made her shudder, blush, and feel such a rush of anger and pride as she had never experienced before. All that was distressing, and especially all that was humiliating, in her position rose vividly to her mind. They, the French, would settle in this house. Le General Rameau would occupy Prince Andrew's study and amuse himself by looking through and reading his letters and papers. Mademoiselle Bourienne would do the honors of Bogucharovo for him. I should be given a small room as a favor, the soldiers would violate my father's newly dug grave to steal his crosses and stars, they would tell me of their victories over the Russians, and would pretend to sympathize with my sorrow, thought Princess Mary, not thinking her own thoughts but feeling bound to think like her father and her brother. For herself she did not care where she remained or what happened to her, but she felt herself the representative of her dead father and of Prince Andrew. Involuntarily she thought their thoughts and felt their feelings. What they would have said and what they would have done she felt bound to say and do. She went into Prince Andrew's study, trying to enter completely into his ideas, and considered her position. The demands of life, which had seemed to her annihilated by her father's death, all at once rose before her with a new, previously unknown force and took possession of her. Agitated and flushed she paced the room, sending now for Michael Ivanovitch and now for Tikhon or Dron. Dunyasha, the nurse, and the other maids could not say in how far Mademoiselle Bourienne's statement was correct. Alpatych was not at home, he had gone to the police. Neither could the architect Michael Ivanovitch, who on being sent for came in with sleepy eyes, tell Princess Mary anything. With just the same smile of agreement with which for 15 years he had been accustomed to answer the old prince without expressing views of his own, he now replied to Princess Mary, so that nothing definite could be got from his answers. The old valet Tikhon, with sunken, emaciated face that bore the stamp of inconsolable grief, replied, "Yes, Princess," to all Princess Mary's questions and hardly refrained from sobbing as he looked at her. At length Dron, the village elder, entered the room and with a deep bow to Princess Mary came to a halt by the doorpost. Princess Mary walked up and down the room and stopped in front of him. "Dranushka," she said, regarding as a sure friend this Dranushka who always used to bring a special kind of gingerbread from his visit to the fair at Vyazma every year and smilingly offer it to her, "Dranushka, now since our misfortune," she began, but could not go on. "We are all in God's hands," said he, with a sigh. They were silent for a while. "Dranushka, Alpatych has gone off somewhere and I have no one to turn to. Is it true, as they tell me, that I can't even go away?" "Why shouldn't you go away, Your Excellency?" "You can go," said Dron. "I was told it would be dangerous because of the enemy." "Dear friend, I can do nothing. I understand nothing. I have nobody. I want to go away tonight or early tomorrow morning." Dron paused. He looked askance at Princess Mary and said, "There are no horses, I told Yakov Alpatych so." "Why are there none?" asked the princess. "It's all God's scourge," said Dron. "What horses we had have been taken for the army or have died, this is such a year. It's not a case of feeding horses, we may die of hunger ourselves. As it is, some go 3 days without eating. We've nothing, we've been ruined. Princess Mary listened attentively to what he told her. The peasants are ruined. They have no bread, she asked. They're dying of hunger, said Dran. It's not a case of carting. But why didn't you tell me, Dranushka? Isn't it possible to help them? I'll do all I can. To Princess Mary it was strange that now, at a moment when such sorrow was filling her soul, there could be rich people and poor, and the rich could refrain from helping the poor. She had heard vaguely that there was such a thing as landlord's corn, which was sometimes given to the peasants. She also knew that neither her father nor her brother would refuse to help the peasants in need, she only feared to make some mistake in speaking about the distribution of the grain she wished to give. She was glad such cares presented themselves, enabling her without scruple to forget her own grief. She began asking Dran about the peasants' needs and what there was in Bogucharovo that belonged to the landlord. But we have grain belonging to my brother, she said. The landlord's grain is all safe, replied Dran proudly. Our prince did not order it to be sold. Give it to the peasants, let them have all they need, I give you leave in my brother's name, said she. Dran made no answer but sighed deeply. Give them that corn if there is enough of it. Distribute it all. I give this order in my brother's name, and tell them that what is ours is theirs. We do not grudge them anything. Tell them so. Dran looked intently at the princess while she was speaking. Discharge me, little mother, for God's sake. Order the keys to be taken from me, said he. I have served 23 years and have done no wrong. Discharge me, for God's sake. Princess Mary did not understand what he wanted of her or why he was asking to be discharged. She replied that she had never doubted his devotion and that she was ready to do anything for him and for the peasants.